iTestify is about testifying of what Jesus Christ has done and can do in each of our lives. Through testimony of people just like you and through study of His Word, our prayer is to encourage each follower of Christ to be a light in this world. So let your light shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. Matthew 5:16.
Welcome, I Testify, to another conversation about hearing Christ working in our lives. We're glad you can join us for this story. We're also very pleased to have Rodney Bowes, who is a director of Light Ministries and president of Health Expo Resources. Thank you so much for joining us. We'd like to hear how the Lord has helped you start on your missionary journey at a young age till now, just before you describe your ministries.
Okay, well, it's a blessing to be able to be here on this program. It's really an honor for me to be able to share what God has done in my own personal life. And so I'd like to begin with what happened when I was 19 years old. I was going to Union College in Nebraska, and one of my friends and I said, we need to take a year off of school and do something. We didn't know exactly what we wanted to do at that time, and so through some different talks that we heard, we decided to go to the chaplain's office and look through that big call book for student missionary calls. And while we were there were a couple of calls that really caught our attention. It wasn't the one that was in Hawaii or the islands or anything with the opportunity for surfing. It was more of the frontier kind of work. So there was one of them that was in West Africa. I think it was Burkina Faso or something like that. And the other was the Philippines. And they were both with Adventist Frontier Missions. And so we signed up, or we contacted AFM to see what they would like for us to do next. And they said, well, you know, you need to start fundraising and so forth and so on. And then the summertime came around, and it was time for us to begin that fundraising process. And I remember very distinctly receiving the phone call that they said, okay, it's time to officially begin. And when I contacted my friend, he said, I'm not going to go. And I said, really? Okay. And the call that we were going to go to is actually a Student Missionary Plus call, which means it's a little bit further away in the jungle from the career missionaries. And so I remember thinking, well, okay, I guess it's just me that's going to go. And it was a very interesting experience going back to the training that AFM does. It's a 1-month training in Berrien Springs. And so we had a really nice time during that. And that whole time, AFM was looking for another person to go with me, because they don't like to send people just by themselves out there. And they didn't find anyone. So I was 19 years old, and I remember very distinctly coming and flying out of LAX by myself on my way over to the Philippines, and arriving in Manila, getting a little bit of orientation, and then going to a very primitive village on the island of Mindoro in the Philippines.
Was that your first mission?
So that was not my first mission trip. It was definitely the most impacting in my life. The first one was in Academy. We did like a Maranatha church building project in Mexico. But this was a whole new level.
It was the farthest one you'd been to at that point.
Farthest one, and by myself. And so I remember the first Friday night, the career missionary and I hiked up the riverbed about an hour, crossing the river several times, getting to our little village, and oh, by the way, I took way too much stuff. I had all my backpacks, and the first day I knew I took way too much because I had to carry it all up the riverbed. over the rocks and through the river. And anyways, the career missionary there, he said, okay, here you are. We'll see you next week.
Wow. He did.
No one spoke English. They spoke a language that the missionaries were actually writing down. So it was a verbal language. So there's only about 10,000 of us in the world that speak this dialect of the people, the Alangan tribe on Mindoro.
And you say we, including yourself.
Yeah, I'm one of those.
Wow.
I mean, it was sink or swim.
Were you trained on it beforehand, or you learned it?
No.
There? You learned it there.
When we got to the hotel in Manila, the career missionaries who'd been there for several years gave us a little cheat sheet, 20 words, survival words, whatever. And that was it. There's no dictionary. You can't go on Duolingo. You can't do Rosetta Stone. I mean, there's no way to learn it.
Wow. Except
being there. So I spent a lot of time, the first 6 months, I was only learning the language. I was there with my tape recorder, no iPhones back in those times or anything. So I was with my tape recorder going around and recording. I learned the words, what is this, what is that? And then I played with the kids and I learned the language, and about 9 months, I started translating.
Wow.
It was an incredible experience. And that really kind of forged my entire trajectory in life. Because before going on that particular trip, I was planning to be a physician assistant. That's what my thoughts were and what I was kind of taking at Union College. But
so I'm just curious though, while you're on that trip, so it takes you, 6 to 9 months, you start feeling like you're getting a handle on the language. Like, was it to a point where you could actually, share and do mission work with the people? I mean, how did that go?
So, as you probably know, a student missionary call is 9 months long. And when I was getting close to that time, I said, I can't leave. I love it here. This is great. I had so much fulfillment in my life at that time. I said, I'm going to stay again. So I raised money again. I came back one time and we raised some money to build a church and a clinic. And I went back and I did learn the language so that I could speak fluently to the people. We had Bible studies on my porch. There was no church when I first got there, but we built the church while I was there. And so I did learn the language, and I translated all kinds of Bible study guides for the local leaders. And then I was also translating Mark Finley's book, Studying Together, as well as I was working on some of the books of Ellen White.
Amazing.
Specifically, Story of Redemption.
Amazing.
It's a beautiful book.
Yes,
So you ended up being there like a year and a half total?
Try 2.5.
2.5? Wow.
I kept extending, and it was just such a rewarding experience. I just kept staying. And I stayed almost until the very end of the actual mission project. There were a couple people who came and they finished out everything because there was a locally established, vibrant church that was planting another church. So.
Wow.
And then I came back here to the United States and tried to go to regular school again, and I just didn't fit in at all in that environment. I got to the classroom and it was so sterile. I was used to hands-on missionary work, and I said, I've got to do something else. And so through the Lord's providence, I found Weimar College. And not only did I find Weimar College, I found my wife at Weimar College.
Nice.
So that was an excellent experience in my life. Definitely a highlight.
What did you study there? What did you do?
So I went to Weimar because I still had an interest in health at that time. As I told you, I was going to be a physician assistant. And while I was in the Philippines, I had a revelation, and I actually through reading Ministry of Healing, and I found out it would be far better to prevent disease than to deal with it once people had it. So I said, I've got to learn how to do prevention. And Weimar is very well known for its New Start program and kind of prevention and education. and natural remedies. And that's what took me to Weimar to study those things. I also did the Amazing Facts course. My wife and I both did it. And then after that, got involved in full-time ministry and pastoral work after doing those courses and then finishing a degree in religion.
Amen.
Oh, wow. And where was the degree in religion from then?
I went back to Union.
Back to you.
Full circle.
Wow.
Okay. So
Never say never.
it's something we've, just been talking about recently. So you really wanted to mix, health with sharing the gospel message, right?
They go
Join the two
together.
together,
You know, the Bible is very clear in the Great Commission. Many people, when you think of the Great Gospel Commission, they think of Matthew 28. But there's a parallel, and that's Mark 16. And in Mark 16, verse 15 says, go preach the gospel. But verse 18 talks about laying hands on the sick, and they shall recover.
Let's go there. Let's go. Let's turn there. Let's read that.
Let's do it. Let's do it, definitely. It's definitely one of my favorite passages that shows us clearly exactly what is happening in God's ideal evangelistic method.
And you said it's Mark 16,
15 specifically, that's the one that simply says, go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. And then verse 18 has the clear connection with the health message. And that's at the very end of verse 18. It says at the very last phrase, they will lay hands on the sick and they will recover. So not only is it talking about miraculous healing, but I think it's talking about healing in general. And the more that I've studied and done different things, I find that God likes to use simple things, natural means used in accordance with His will bring about supernatural results. And I've seen it over and over again.
So if there was one thing that you could name that you brought back from that time that you spent in the Philippines that kick-started the rest of your ministry and your life with Christ, what would that be? Something that you brought back that you now use in your ministry?
Yeah, there were just one thing.
Okay, well, let's start with one thing.
I mean, there's a few things that are just so powerful that totally changed my life while I was in the Philippines. One of those was the importance of my own personal relationship with Christ and just the absolute need of Bible study for myself. I had no sermons to listen to. I was in the jungle with no electricity and everything else. And before that time, I was either dependent on my friends or on my family or whatever. There I learned I've got to be dependent on Christ alone. And so developing that personal relationship through Bible study, through prayer, and through service was a powerful, powerful thing. So if there was one, that would be the one, but there's more.
Tell us more.
So not only that, but I also learned just how many people there are that will not hear the gospel unless we go. There are lots of people who don't have a television to turn on, and even if they do, they're not going to hear any gospel programming in their own language. So I have developed a burden to present and develop materials in the language of the people. Because if any of you speak any other languages, you know that your heart language is where it makes sense to you. If you have a second language, that one is in the periphery. And yes, there's a lot of people around the world that speak English and can read here and there, but there's nothing like hearing it in their own tongue. And as the Bible talks about, we need to take the gospel to every kindred and nation and tongue and people. There's a lot of work. So I also learned that the world is a lot bigger than sometimes we think it is in our interconnected societies. There's still a lot of people who need to hear the gospel in their own tongue.
Amen.
So that was another powerful, very important lesson.
Will you tell us a little bit about the ministries that you're involved in now?
Oh, yes, definitely. So after coming back and kind of getting a new vision in life, I started doing pastoral work for a little while, combining the health ministry and the gospel ministry. After doing pastoral work, my wife and I went to Wildwood Lifestyle Center and Hospital. And while we were there, we did the training there, a very balanced training that combines health education with practical natural remedies and evangelism. And through that, we started a ministry called LIGHT. And LIGHT is the Lay Institute for Global Health Training. That's the acronym.
Okay.
And the reason we started it is because we were getting so many requests from all over the world of people who wanted to learn about health evangelism, and we couldn't bring them all to the U.S. So we developed LIGHT as a ministry to go to the world. And so we started that in 2008. God has blessed it quite a bit, and we've been in more than 90 countries now, trained more than 22,000 people with LIGHT ministry. Our curriculum is available in many languages, and we're adding more and more as time goes by. So I'm the division director for the projects that we have in Africa and East Asia.
Wow. What sort of things are you teaching them, like to help them further that ministry with other people?
Yeah, so we have we call it a essentials course. It's 120 hours.
Oh, wow.
So the essential, we tried to compress the material into as small a package, and that was really what we found out. That was the essentials. So we have Bible study, we have prophecy, because we found out a lot of people need to better understand the major prophecies in the Bible. So we studied Daniel and Revelation, coming events, and then we also have a class called Principles of Health and Healing that shows from the Bible, you know, God's plan for health and healing. And then we have practical classes, hydrotherapy, which is a lost art, in my opinion. Then we have massage class, we have cooking class, practical demonstrations, and then common diseases. So people can know how to use lifestyle and natural remedies to help themselves in battling these different diseases.
So it sounds like you actually have people who are going out there to teach people these
Oh,
things.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we have hundreds of volunteers.
Wow.
You all are welcome.
Volunteers?
Volunteers.
All volunteers?
There's a few of us who receive a stipend to do what we do, but many people are volunteers. They want to go for a month or whatever, and they go and they teach with us. And so, yeah, we have
I would
a
love
blend.
to volunteer.
Okay. That's great.
Signed up.
That's great. That's great. I'm getting ready to go to China. Is one of the next places I'll be heading very soon. We work together with the organized Seventh-day Adventist Church. So we go on invitation, and we just we're part of a big project in Zambia. Maybe you heard about the Total Member Involvement Plan. We were doing training as part of that. So we always work together with the church. We're just starting a new school in Japan. I got back from Japan a couple weeks ago.
Oh, that's where I want to go.
That's where you want to go?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Aaron's dream.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Because Japan is a very challenging place, and we're starting a missionary school to train people to go and to do mission work. And we just dedicated a lifestyle center in Kazakhstan.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah, it is.
It's very exciting.
So you travel a lot.
If you ask my wife, I travel a whole lot. I don't, I feel like there's so much more. I'm always having to say, I'm sorry, I can't do this, I can't do that. So it depends on the year. Sometimes I'm gone more than others, and so it depends on the month as well.
Have you ever gone back to the Philippines?
I have, actually. It hasn't been for several years now. I used to work specifically in Southeast Asia, but we have another director who's taken that responsibility. So I've devoted my time primarily to East Asia, which is China and Korea and Japan and Mongolia and those areas. India is also part of that as well. And then Africa. And Africa is a huge, I mean, it's a continent.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a big place. Yeah.
Can you tell us? Oh, go ahead, Erin.
Oh, I was just going to ask, you know, what would you tell someone who's like young, who was your age? You said 19, right?
I was 19 when I...
Yeah, what would you tell someone to get them to go out there? Because sometimes, you know, people feel like, I can't do this, I don't have the money, I'm not educated enough, I don't know what I'm doing, you know, it's like...
Those are just the qualifications that God needs.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Because one thing that I found for sure is that money should really never be an issue. The Bible says God owns all the silver and gold. He says the cattle on 1,000 hills is his. And I've seen it over and over again. When I was in the Philippines, I lived on $50 a month.
Wow.
Wow.
And I was fine. I saved money at $50 a month. There's nothing to buy. I was in the jungle, right? I mean, so money is never an issue. In regard to education, what I found is one of the best ways to actually minister is like Jesus asking questions. Who asks questions? Learners, people who want to learn. So for young people, it's the perfect time, it's the perfect opportunity to go. You know, there's not a lot of life commitments. Just go. Just go. That's what I say. So I'm always trying to encourage young people to go on a short-term trip and, if at all possible, for a year to really get immersed. Many times we go on short mission trips and we stay together and we don't mingle with the people and really get to know, and you don't get all the benefit if you are not living with the people.
Yeah. I've gone on a mission trip and I've experienced that.
Yeah.
Staying with the people.
Staying with the people. It's powerful. We're just planning a church mission trip to Cuba. And so we're going to be going and doing frontline mission work there.
Wow.
In just
Really
a couple
cool.
months.
Oh yeah, Cuba's open, so we can go.
Cuba is open.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to hear a couple more specific stories, just maybe the ones that stick out in your mind as the most memorable, of either a missionary who has gone with light and experienced something over there, or experienced a testimony over there, or someone who you've reached out to in one of your international countries that you've gone to that just sticks out in your mind. Do you have maybe a person or two?
My mind is just going through all the people that I've met, and we could be here for another 3 hours as I go through story after story. But I think one of the greatest mission fields that exist in the world is in India.
Why?
Well, just from a numerical standpoint, if you look at India and you look at the number of unreached tribal people, groups of people, there are more than 4,000 distinct tribes or groups of individuals that are unreached.
Wow.
That's huge when you compare it. I mean, yes, there's a lot of other places, and India is also becoming very hostile to Christianity. I was there a couple of years ago, and you could see it. I mean, the government is very adamant on stamping out Christianity. So there's more persecution, there's more churches being burned and pastors being imprisoned and so forth. So in regard to a testimony, my friend Joshua comes to my mind. He came and studied here at Wildwood, and he had a burden to go back and reach his people. So he is there, not only working in India, but he has dreams to work in the other areas, some which are closed to Christian missions that are right around there. And he's devoted his life to reaching his own people. And we've sent lots of teams of missionaries to go over to India. So if any of you want to go to India, I've got lots of places you could go. So that's definitely one of the highlights that I've seen in my mission experience.
It's one of the hardest and perhaps one of the most rewarding. The people that are closest to you, your family, or your own ethnic culture is so close to your heart.
Yeah, to see your countrymen, to see those, you know, that live with you, for sure. And I would also like to mention that over the course of time, the Lord has also allowed me to become very involved in community health evangelism. And so that's been a very rewarding thing to not only teach about what we're doing, but actually equip people. And so we have a whole nother ministry called Health Expo Resources, where we give groups, churches, and individuals the tools that they need to reach out into their community.
I see that that is a common thread in your ministries, that it is about the people and the layperson and equipping them instead of just giving them or showing them, but really training them and teaching them so that they can spread the light as well.
Yeah. They usually can do it better than we can.
Amen.
So, we try to translate our material into the other languages as much as possible. Yeah, it's a very important aspect.
Yes.
You know, you had mentioned a verse in Romans, I think it was 8.
Yeah, Romans 8:28 is actually the one that I wanted to come across. Yeah.
What makes that special to you? Like,
well,
Can we read it first?
Sure,
Yeah.
please. Feel free.
Why don't you read it, Aaron?
okay. Romans 8:28, it says, "And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are called according to his purpose."
Yeah, so that verse tells me that no matter what happens, especially if it's a challenge, is actually going to work for my good somehow. And that's very important, because in mission work, you know the 3 A's for mission work? Do you know the 3 A's for mission work? All right. So the first A is adaptability. The second A is adaptability. And the third A is adaptability. Exactly. So, you know, whatever could go wrong does go wrong.
Right.
And what I have found is that God's word is true, and he has plans for us. Jeremiah 29:11 says that he has plans to prosper us, to give us hope in a future.
Yeah.
And so even if there's a challenge, knowing that all things work together for good is absolutely essential.
Yeah. I really appreciate you bringing up that verse, because sometimes we feel like we don't have purpose, and that our purpose isn't his purpose, but God wants us to be a part of his purpose. And I appreciate your stories as well, because you can see in your life how you are aligned with God's purpose. So thank you so much for coming on the show. I know that if you are interested in looking at the type of work that he does and volunteering, you can go to lightingtheworld.org. And we will pray for you, and we ask you to tune in again. Thank you.